हाय फ्रेंड्स, आज हम बात करने वाले हैं पावर सेक्टर के बारे में। पावर सेक्टर एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग मुकाम पे है बिकॉज इंडिया की जीडीपी बढ़ने वाली है और जीडीपी बढ़ने के लिए यू रिक्वायर अ लॉट ऑफ पावर। सो पावर डिमांड बढ़ने के कारण पावर सप्लाई भी बढ़ेगी और इसका इम्पैक्ट हमें पावर इंडस्ट्री में कहाँ सबसे ज़्यादा देखने को मिलेगा, ये इस वीडियो में मैं बात करूंगा और इंडस्ट्री का स्ट्रक्चर आपके साथ सिंप्लीफाई करूंगा बिकॉज वेयर यू शुड रियली पुट योर माइंड्स ऑन कि इस सेक्टर में हम कुछ बिजनेसेस को स्टडी करें। सो इसलिए ये एक सिंप्लीफाइंग वीडियो है। साधन सिंप्लीफाई करता है सेक्टर्स को। ट्रांसक्रिप्शन पे एक डीप डाइव वीडियो है, लिंक आपको मिल जाएगा और इस पर हमने एक डीप डाइव वेबिनार हम लोगों ने किया था जिसके रिकॉर्डिंग्स हम प्राइम मेंबर्स के साथ शेयर करने वाले हैं। नेक्स्ट 20-25 मिनट्स में यू आर गोइंग टू सी कंप्लीट ब्रेकडाउन ऑफ पावर सेक्टर इंडस्ट्री वाइज, जिसमें कौन कौन से डिफरेंट बिजनेस मॉडल एग्जिस्ट करते हैं और रिन्यूएबल वर्सेस थर्मल का जो कनंड्रम है। अब लोग अभी बात कर रहे हैं कि थर्मल का कोई फ्यूचर नहीं है, बट आई हैव अ पॉइंट ऑफ डिसएग्रीमेंट विद देम। विंड और सोलर में किस सेक्टर की क्या हिस्ट्री रही है और कैसा फ्यूचर हो सकता है, इसमें हम डिबेट करेंगे वीडियो के दूसरे भाग में। इन सब चीज़ों को अगर आप जानना चाहते हैं, अंडरस्टैंड करना चाहते हैं, दिस वीडियो इज फॉर यू एंड दिस इज फॉर एजुकेशनल पर्पस। डोंट टेक एनी नेम एज अ इन्वेस्टमेंट एडवाइस। वी माइट or might not hold any securities in power sector. This is strictly for educational purpose and I'm not a SEBI registered investment advisor, so take everything with a pinch of salt. My view could be biased. I have been investing into this sector for long. अगर अभी तक आपने साधन को सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है, don't forget to subscribe it and turn on the bell notification so that हमारी वीडियो आप तक पहुंच पाए। Industry structure of power sector. Basically, there are a couple of blocks which are visible on the screen. Central piece is more important. The central may you will see power generation, power transmission, and power distribution. So first of all, we need to understand that power sector is a regulated sector and the role of regulator is of paramount. So here we have certain regulators like CERC, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and there are state ERCs. So it is basically a concurrent list item. Electricity comes under a purview of state as well as central entities. So CERC is the central nodal and regulator, and the state ERCs, respective state ERCs, take care of their local thing. So if we structurally look at it, then power generation is basically least to do with the state matter. Here only CRC rules generally prevails. Generally CRC is dominant in power generation. In power transmission, it is CRC and PGCIL is the nodal agency, which is again a central unit. It is not a state subject. Generally, it is more of the power transmission. Whatever we are going to talk about more, it would be under preview of PGCIL and the CERC because it's a more of a central topic. But when we talk about distribution, it is largely a state subject. We choose not to invest into distribution because you need to understand the state dynamics of respective state, respective player who are dominant into which state and all. So we rather choose to understand this sector from a national perspective. So that's why we choose to look into power transmission because we understand one regulator operates it. And that's why this is the control variables are very less in power transmission and in power generation also. Then there are companies, there are power ancillaries who are participant into the power value chain, which we'll talk about, which support generation, transmission, and distribution. So basically, this three legs, actually, initially it was generally called power sector and there was no three legs were there. It was bundled. So unbundling happened in 1990s because when generation guy has to look at the distribution part also. So the focus was not there. So, and during till 1990s when India was growing from a Hindu rate of growth before Manmohan Singh and PV Narasimha Rao government came. Before that, the things were very cozy and everything was so bureaucratic that all three units were taken care by state and central also. So, but central agencies were created during the time like NTPC, which was the biggest power generator in the country. It was set out in somewhere in 50s, 60s. So some institution building happened in 50s, 60s like NTPC, NHPC, National Hydro Power Company. So these two were the parental organization of this sector, so to say, on the generation side. If we have to choose between the parentage of NTPC versus NHPC, then I would choose with the NTPC, because NTPC is a very balanced and very good work culture and very sorted developer power generator. And NHPC has been the distant cousin of NTPC and not so managed well. And so whenever I see personally that NHPC background comes in, then there are chances of crony capitalism and those things goes up. And there are certain other institutions like SJVN, that Satluj Jal Vikas Nigam Limited. All those institutions were established before 1990s. But 1990s may what happened, that government said that no, even every state has to choose that there has to be three entity. One would be looking at generation, other would be looking at transmission, and the third one would be looking at the distribution. So basically, if you look at the state hierarchy, then state in state the most powerful thing is distribution. State look after the distribution, so state discoms are more powerful state-wise in structurally, and some of them have transmission companies. Like Delhi has a Delhi Transcom. So Delhi has a separate transmission company, but many states have a very weak hand into transmission. They don't do much into transmission. Most of the thing at transmission is handled by PGCIL. This is Power Grid, and they are the Karta Dharta of transmission sector, so to say. And these guys are supported by a power financing ecosystem, which is basically helping them raise capital for generation, transmission, and distribution company. So in this list, I would put first of all Power Finance Corporation, which is the biggest of all, which has and then REC, Rural Energy Electrification Commission company. So REC and PFC, they were like the sister companies for a long time, but later on they merged in last 5 years. So REC PFC is now one entity. They are owned by the same entities. Any which way, they were mostly 75% owned by Government of India, indirectly or directly. But now they are united into one. There is another small entity called IREDA, which is Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency, which looks after the growth of renewable energy. And this renewable energy came into picture quite late in 2000, I think 2005 or that was a time when Ministry of New and Renewable Energy was created. So everything was falling under Ministry of Power before this. But early 2000, this carve out was done, and henceforth the schemes like Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission, National Solar Mission, was propagated by then Congress minister. And that time, this was 2010 onwards, the solar started. But before that, the wind has its turn. I will talk about that. But this has been the power financing side, and this was supported by IREDAs of the world. And the PFC RECs has this agenda that they need to support this ecosystem. But largely, PFC and REC has been supporting the weaker hands into power distribution sector. Like many state discoms, they were not doing well. Like Bihar state discoms or AP discoms were not really that legit in financing muscle. Power was lacking, so they used to get fund from PFC at a softer loan rate, and that's how this whole distribution thing was happening into through PFC and REC. So their role was very critical into funding and for the whole ecosystem funding. And later on, this power exchanges were born. It's a new ideas basically, where what happened that when we got a vibrant generation companies and vibrant distribution companies, power system was evolving. That time there was a need for a power exchange. The way stock market has evolved, so stock exchanges were born. Likewise, power exchanges were born, IEX, and there was another one. So there are two power exchanges in India operating right now. So this is the overall structure. So let's now go into the generation a bit deeper, because generation is more like most of you understand the Hindu mythology of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. So Brahma being the generator. So generation companies are the genesis of this power sector. So let's first talk about the generator. And generations involves kind of a two structure. One is the thermal part. So thermal has been the majority. It has been 100%, at least 95%. If we look at 20 years back, then 95% was thermal, and 5 to 10% was this small hydro plants and even bigger hydro. So hydro and thermal was a mix, 90-10 for a good long 50, 60 years. And NTPC was ruling the roost because they were commanding 90%, 80% of that 90%. So these were early days, and BHEL was supporting NTPC. So BHEL was in the background of NTPC, giving them the turbines for thermal generation. But things changed when new energies started coming in, and right now the target is to reduce the thermal to around 50% of overall mix at capacity wise. I'm saying, so there are two things which I would like you to know. That one is the capacity. Like if we today bifurcate the whole power sector, then this 100 would be divided into 55 odd into thermal side and 45 odd into non-thermal side. But 55 odd thermal power generates works at a very good plant load factor, which is the power. If it is marked as 100 megawatt, it will be available for 85% of the time. So it will generate 85 megawatt for practical reason. But on the other hand, all the renewable energy, including hydro, wind, everybody else has a variable plant load factor. Nobody knows what kind of wind will flow and wind PLF, what kind of generation would be happening in the wind turbines. Likewise, in solar, nobody can predict whether sun god will appear today or not. So those 45% has been effectively at a plant load factor of 25-30%, 25%, because only the hydro has a high utilization plant load factor in terms of 40, 35 plus 40%, because 6 months we have monsoon and all those things. So rivers, so the hydro plants which have storage into it. So there are two types of hydro. One is the run on river, ROR, where there is no storage, it's just dependent on the river flow. So those have very low PLF, but the storage, if you build up a storage and then you do generate hydropower plant, those power plants still have a higher 50% kind of PLF. But overall, the mix of hydro put together would be 30-35% odd. And if you talk about the wind and others, then the PLFs are 20 to 25, wind plus solar put together. So effectively, this 45% of this power mix is operating at 30% at best PLF. So effectively, the power which you are getting in your home is effectively 70% made of thermal energy and 30% made of renewable energy. I mean, I'm just taking a very ballpark range. So thermal, we are still dependent on thermal. Many people say that thermal is a written off story. That's not the case. With all due respect to thermal, let's move to the other side, which is solar and wind, where lots of buck have moved. So let's look at the chart here. So overall, if we start with FY 2017 to FY 25, on the side you can see that solar, which is on the yellow, its generation has moved from 5 gigawatt, 5,000 megawatt is 5 gigawatt in 2017 to 25 gigawatt. So kind of 5x in last 10 years. And next year, 2026, the expectations as per MNRE and the JNK research is that it will reach the 30 gigawatt counter. But to give you a background where the story is going to be and where it should be. So if you have heard of a 500 gigawatt renewable energy target, if that's the case, if a country wants to reach to 500 gigawatt, then they need to have a 50 gigawatt of strike rate every year. So still we are at 30, majority of it is coming from solar. So next year 30 gigawatt will be solar, and let's see other part also. So 30 will be taken care by solar next year, and balance 20 will be looking at other alternative options like wind. So windmill, let's see how the game has played so far. But before we go to wind, let's cover the solar part. So you can see that these graphs, these are a growing line. So if we draw a trend line, it would be a 45 degree slope. It has been rising every year, except barring a few years when FY19 the installation was lower than 18. But the growth above 0% growth was almost there in all years except two. So it is a growing pie. But if we look at wind, then you would see that towers were quite early. Like FY17 itself, there was a 5 gigawatt, more than 5 gigawatt. And FY25, it is 4 gigawatt. So the slope has been slightly distorted into wind. So there is a reason behind it. So I'll just sum it up the wind story for you guys. So wind has so many people think that wind is early and people are not adopting it. That's not the case. Wind has a very early history before 2017 itself. 2010 to 2017 was one of the best days for wind turbine makers, including Suzlon. So Suzlon IPO came somewhere, I think 2015 or 16. During that time, it has come. And even Reliance IPO, Reliance Energy IPO had come. So those were the time where companies were getting very high multiples in 2015, 16, 17 and all. Because 2017, the wind installation were all-time high. Because there was a regulatory support given to wind, and wind was not just a power financing tool. It was used as a power tool. It was not a power tool. It was a financial product because it was customized by regulators in a such a way to kind of propagate this technology that it was more like a tax saving product. So it was sold to HNI investors, including, if I name a few, then Ashwarya Rai had invested into many wind farms in 2015, 16. Those were supplied by Suzlon that back then. So it was basically these projects were given an accelerated depreciation. So if you understand depreciation, it is a notional weakening of asset. So every year an asset gets depreciated by 5%, 10%, depending on the economic life of the asset. But here, what government said that it is accelerated depreciation. It's by written down value method, which means, and the rate was 80%. So if I'm investing 100 crore plant or 100 rupees plant in wind in 2015, I'm talking about. So next year I can claim 80 rupees was depreciated. So what does this mean? That 100 rupees may say I am left with 20 rupees on my balance sheet and 80 rupees has gone as a OPEX, as an not OPEX, but as an expense. It has been expensed out from my PNL. So what happened that whatever profit I'm making, I don't need to pay taxes on it because on paper, I'm not making any profit, but on cash flow basis, I'm making profit. So this helped many HNI investor to save taxes. So if I invest 100 crore, I am saving 80 crore in year one from tax outgo. So what can be more wonderful than this for a person with more than 25, 50 crore of net worth? So even many big shots like Ajay Devan also invested into solar later on. Solar may the accelerated depreciation was lower, but still it was trying to give that flavor. But wind was the success story back then, and so for solar there was a many hem and how in structurings, but wind was a very well structured financial product. So that's why wind has seen its heydays, and Suzlon has seen it peak, and that's why the prices of Suzlon, what you see in the past is actually not a glorified, it is a glorified number, but at that time, Suzlon had a different outlook put together. Now, if we come back to 2018, what happened in 2018 that they started to think the accelerated depreciation was tapering off. They said, no more 80% accelerated depreciation. You can live with 25% accelerated depreciation. They were at par with solar. So people thought that solar is better than wind. So people moved to solar, and you can see solar started going up, installation going up. And also competitive bidding was introduced. So it was not that only Suzlon will or only one, two player will kind of give turbines. So competitive bidding means reverse bidding, which is that whoever will quote the lowest tariff, lowest rate of power, that will win. So in that regime, the wind was not picked up because wind has a higher capex. It was costlier than turbine than solar to begin with. So capex and the PLF wise, wind has better PLF, but 25% kind of 25% PLF. But solar cost curve were flattening. Solar panel prices were crashing like anything from 2017 onwards. So the solar storage took off and wind story tapered down. But 2024, if you see, the trend has changed. In 2024, the YOY growth was 50% around for last 2 years. And next year also, we are expected to get a 6 gigawatt addition in FY26. And we are right now at 4 gigawatts. So 50% state jump. So this 50% growth has come because there was certain regulatory changes that happened in wind. That's why the support has come. So this reverse bidding has been taken away, and that's why this thing has took off. So this is the story of wind and solar put together, with I think is very good for context setting. And with that understanding, let's go to the other part of it. That if we zoom into solar installation trend, then FY22, we were setting up. So there are color codes like in dark yellow is utility scale solar, and then something rooftop is light, milder yellow, and the off white is off grid. So rooftop is something which has been initiated by even then Prime Minister, but it was very slow takeoff, and PM has taken this on his shoulder after this during this election time 2024 election. He kind of given a very good outlook for this rooftop Pradhan Mantri, that Urja Data and all those things, schemes will come. So you can see that installation has grown in FY24 to FY25 from around barely a very small amount to a sizable amount. So around 4 gigawatt is added into rooftop alone. No, yeah, it is more than 4. It's a kind of 5 gigawatt has come from rooftop, which was minuscule 5 years back. So rooftop is catching up. Utility scale solar means the solar which is getting supplied to utilities. Utilities like Tata Power or Jaipur Vidyut Nigam or Bihar's distribution company Discom, and all those Discoms are utility. So they are the ultimate buyer of this power. So this is rising up from. So overall, the pie has grown from 14 to 24 gigawatt in installation has grown to that. So which is meaningful. And in wind, you can see the till FY25, this line has almost become 4x. So 1.1 gigawatt to 4.2 gigawatt, and industry is gearing up for greener days into wind. And solar, you can see that it has kind of doubled, but wind has kind of done 4x into last 4 years.
Solar and wind both have grown, but you'll notice the inflection point is FY 21-22. Yeah, almost for both. I think one reason was that while FY 27 ke baad, wind had become a regulatory backbencher, and it was opened up to competitive bidding, and the industry could not handle it. At that time, FY17 में the International Solar Alliance, which is a UN body stationed in India, headquartered in India, that had started, and the cost of putting up solar capacity was significantly lower. So the government thought that we should promote solar without wind per se. And what happened, they realized was that the generation profile, which you also alluded to earlier, the generation profile of solar and wind are very distinctive, and the grid does not like intermittent power sent to the grid. So there is this stability angle to it, and they realize that by 2022 now we actually need to have hybrid power plants, renewable energy plants. And that is why you see FY21-22 may almost in a similar trend. Obviously wind has been more dramatic, but that is where that has come into play. And to add to that, if you remember, April 28th में Spain में there was a loss of massive
Right.
there was a massive power outage for 10 hours, and the reason for that was also this, that they relied too much on renewable energy, and because it is intermittent, the grid almost, maybe you can give the more technical aspects of it, but the grid could not handle so much intermittent power. There was not enough thermal to provide that stability. So the stability angle is actually quite key, and that is why both are needed. Wind and solar together are needed. So that was the point I want to make.
This hybrid is the future, because of the grid outage, which was very real in Spain. It has been highlighted in the world media, and also in India itself, the planners were thinking ahead that when you put lots of renewable energy, which is totally intermittent and you cannot predict, then the grid has to be robust, and it has to be interconnected very closely. So currently in India, we have 5 regional grids, and we call it national grid, but there are east, west, north, south, and there is a northeast or something. So there are 5 grids, and their interstate connection they started planning. No, we should integrate the grid so that the stability remains there. So because the onset of not just renewable power of different variety, also the advent of EV is going to take a toll on this energy infrastructure, which is grid. So EV would spike up the energy demand in one corner. Let's say I'm charging 100 EVs, starting getting pulling out from, let's say, Delhi NCR, and they are running on a fast charger, then the voltage drawdown and all those things will take on a very difficult pressure on the grid. So this thing was understood by planners, and they thought that for that there is spikes into demand also. So we need, and a spike in supply also. So we need to balance both, and that's why during daytime you have good solar energy, and night time is slightly better for wind.
Right.
During evening time, actually evening onwards, it's better for wind. So that's a day profile wise. And also, if seasonal wise we talk about, then all the rainy days, when solar is kind of off, it's zero PLF during June, July, August, till August, September. So that time the wind is operating. So wind has a different cycle. But put together, H2 is better for any renewable energy, just giving a financing flavor to this electricity land map. So S2 generally is better because for wind as well as solar. Because September ends and monsoon ends, so solar has a very good solar radiation comes during winters. I mean, we expect that sunny days are good, but sunny days are very limited in India during March, May, June, and all. But best time is basically during winters when you get a very clear sky and clear sunlight, and that time very good PLFs are achieved. So H2 is better for wind as well as solar. And
In fact, H2 is also very good for all the projects coming online. So a lot of the projects are also commissioned because monsoon may there are technical issues, or I would say weather issues in terms of
right.
actually achieving the finishing the project. So that is why also you will notice with a lot of EPC players, almost all EPC players, the H2 will be stronger. So investors sometimes kind of get a little impatient, which happened with Suzlon and Inox, where they were not able to commission and the growth was not as robust as was expected. And the reason for that was that there was some delay because of the monsoon. So that plays out pretty regularly.
Yeah, so I think we will cover on wind in
Yeah.
some separate webinar,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
wind industry is a different niche players are there, which we cannot cover in one
Right.
power
Right.
sector workshop. आशा है आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगा होगा। अगर आपको इस तरीके के डीप डाइव और पसंद है, तो ऐसे सेक्टर का नाम हमें कमेंट में बताएं जिस पे हमें डीप डाइव करना है। इट कुड बी विंड, इट कुड बी डिफेंस, इट कुड बी एरोस्पेस, whatever you deem fit, please don't hesitate to put a comment on. And you can also say how we are doing on YouTube in the comment. Thanks for watching.
Content of this video is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial, investment, or trading advice. The information presented is not a recommendation or endorsement of any particular investment strategy, security, or financial decision. Investing involves risks, and viewers should conduct their own research. The creator of this video is not responsible for any financial losses incurred based on the information provided.